John Dalton. We've been hearing so many stories regarding the Middle East. We've heard about how the South Pars gas field has been attacked, and attacks have been sprawling from one side to another. And we also see that Zelensky from Ukraine, the leader of Ukraine, visiting Qatar in an attempt to understand what are these Shahed drones. I want to know, how are you feeling about this? What other observations do you have for us?
Well, I think the principal observation that I would make is that since Iran has not lost, it's winning. That this is a war of exhaustion. They are able to sort of take the punch, sort of like rope-a-dope that Ali Foreman had back in the Rumble in the Jungle. They're taking all the blows and being able to respond. And as in that situation, the longer they can hold out, the more embarrassing it is for the United States and Israel, who had claimed such superiority that they would be able to end this quickly.
Right.
And I don't think that they understand the composition of the Iranian government, which is basically a two-tiered structure. They're dealing with the people down the bottom, the president, the parliament, those kind of people. But above them, a unit that was created to protect the Islamic Revolution is the Ayatollah and the Republican Guard. They're waging the war. People down here, the citizens, the normal bureaucrats, they're going about their business. And these people are the ones who are waging the war. There seems to be no constructive contact between Israel, Washington, and this little tier of the Iranian government that seems absolutely committed to prosecuting and persecuting this war and being very successful at it if you look at pictures from Tel Aviv. So I think in the marches yesterday in Tel Aviv, by Israeli residents who were sick of the war.
Right. They were protesting the fact that this war should not continue.
It should not, it absolutely should not, because Israel has never been subjected to this kind of punishment. They've meted it out. They've given it to everybody else. This is the first time they're getting it back. And the population is not simply able to absorb that they are not the chosen ones who are protected by some divine right. And therefore, in my view, I think that they're starting to lose faith in the government, which is great.
You were hearing Norman on how he was saying that government employees have not been paid up, and this is not the first time around. In the last 3 months, we've seen 2 American citizens being eliminated by the hands of the immigration agency, ICE, betterly known as. Not only so, the question, the people versus the government. We also hear about a midterm election coming up in the United States, and some social media, it took to storm on social media. Some people were standing in front of the gas stations, taking pictures with the price chart behind them in the United States, how the price of per gallon of fuel has gone up. How do you see this energy crisis looming all across the world, including the United States?
Well, I'm happy to be here. The easy answer. Norman is describing a third world hellhole, which the United States has become under Donald Trump. No resources, no protection, arbitrary arrest and detention. I mean, so the United States is, under Donald Trump, has been sliding actually, and in terms of the world's perception, coming down. And so, I mean, this really, the No Kings March is an example of it. But at the same time, I think that if you look at all of the preliminary elections that have been held, seat after seat has been flipped from Republican to Democrat. Republicans are unable to hold on to the seats that were safe seats. Trump won by 20 points, for example. A new Democrat will come in and win by 15 points. Trump is totally underwater in terms of all of the polls. And he was led with bad information, don't you think, Major? He was with bad information. Mossad fed information that this was going to be an easy fight. And they did not understand the consequences on energy, on fuel. And so he's now deep in a situation where he does not have a plan to get out. He had no plan to get in, no plan to get out. That is a strategic blunder of enormous proportions. And he and Hegseth bear the major responsibility for this. Hegseth seems to be wanting to be the macho king and like double down in terms of force as a solution to this situation. I mean, Iran has been in business as the Persian Empire since 350 before the Common Era. They've been there for 3,000 years. You're not going to overthrow them with some simple little toss of the hat, no matter how much power you think you have. So Trump has stumbled badly. He's penalizing the American citizens. American citizens are awakening to this, and there are political consequences now and more coming down the pike.
We were hearing, Musab, some sort of cooler heads trying to prevail is happening in Pakistan. But in the initial days of this war on Iran, we've seen how Afghanistan and Pakistan were exchanging hostilities between one another. And as John was talking about refugee crisis reopening into the Balochistan province, I think you wanted to add more on this issue. We know that almost about 230 children have been killed in Iran as well. Children usually are the most affected group of people when a war breaks out. We've seen similar things during the Ukraine-Russia war in eastern Ukraine. So I want to ask you, what are some of the effects, as you see, that may lay over to other nations such as Pakistan?
Well, if you go back and want to look at it in terms of the Russian invasion of Afghanistan and what happened in Balochistan, there were enormous tent cities of people who had fled Afghanistan into Balochistan in Pakistan. And they were radicalized. They were the Taliban. They were the students who were driven out of school early, and they constituted the Taliban in the Balochistan province and went back and then took over the Afghanistan government. The same thing could happen with people who have been offended deeply by the invasion of Israel and the United States. These refugees could constitute a future strike force of Iranians who are so offended by the situation they were put in without any fault of their own, that they could be radicalized and become a force, another type of force that has to be dealt with in the future. These are the kind of unintended consequences of war. I happen to have been in Balochistan while those tents were there and dealt with some of the Afghans at the time. And they were, deeply, deeply offended by the fact that there had been this sort of situation foisted on them with no fault of their own. And we're facing the same thing now. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, we know that Hamas and Hezbollah and other people that sort of now were radicalized and have been supported to sort of go back against Israel. A whole new, at least 90 million people in Iran. And among the youth and the students, they were going to be deeply offended by the invasion of their space by Israel and the United States. And while there may be off-ramps and peace and all of that to deal with, there is a fundamental problem that has to be dealt with, and that is we are radicalizing a whole cohort of young people in Iran that will come and fight future wars.
The fallout or the crisis that has been taking shape in Bangladesh as due to a war that is happening in the Middle East, a very important comment that he had said was regarding the remittance warriors who are working in various nations of the Middle East. Now they will cease to have any kind of work due to the war. Businesses are facing uncertainty, and of course that comes in conjunction with foreign investment in those nations. I want to know from John Dalton, you were seeing the nexus between all of this that is combined. Bangladesh is affected, the Philippines are affected, Pakistan, India, and even nations such as South Korea is affected because they depend a lot on crude oil for the semiconductor industry as well. What are your observations? You think it will be over before the American midterms, or do you think that this will have a long-term effect on the world?
Well, I think the American involvement will definitely be over before the midterm. They may try to set up some sort of a garrison along the Straits of Hormuz to protect the flow of oil through there. It'll be more theater than substance, but they may try to do that, just to occupy some to show that they are concerned about the world economy. But they can no longer sustain the war in Iran on behalf of Israel. They were misled by Mossad. They were told this was going to be a one-day battle, we'll kill Ali Khamenei, and then it's over. But they didn't understand, as I said, the structure of the government at all. I also think, though, that it's also beneficial that Bangladesh now has a formal government in place that can do the kind of planning that we're talking about. The 18 months experiment with an interim government, many decisions were made that were ad hoc, that seemed to be short-term, but have had long-term consequences. Trade deals were made that were shown to be like impractical in the current period.
Right.
Many things that were done, a pay rise for all of the bureaucrats of an enormous amount, cannot be sustained if there are not remittances that are coming back, that the government does not have funds to cover some of its obligations. 87% of the remittances, 87% of the workers are in the Middle East.
Right.
They provide 45% roughly of the remittances. So this is alarming. As the major has indicated, they're not going to be providing that kind of money because businesses there are closing and there's no future demand for these kind of workers. Someone's going to have to take a long, hard look at where remittances come from. How is it that 55% of the remittances are coming from the developed countries? That seems odd to me, but somebody can do an audit of that. Go ahead. But the current government, I think, is in a position now to be aggressive, take control, do some planning, introduce austerity, cut back on the budget. A very good idea to go to a 4-day work week. I think that would be very, very effective. They have to show something that they have taken command of the situation. They've got 5 years. Never let a crisis go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel once said. Take advantage of the situation and show that you're ready to do the job.